Welcome to Lead Quick channel. I want to quickly provide you with an update on the presidential election court case and the election or selection of the principal officers of the National Assembly. These are key, happenings. They are key instances that can tell us, that can demonstrate to us, how well we are doing and how good the future is going to look like. Now, if you check our previous videos on the history of presidential election court cases in Nigeria, which we did to kind of give you an insight on what to expect from the 2023 presidential election court case, you will discover that judgments in the past have been delivered based on technicalities. Out of the four of those cases that we previewed, were adjudicated by the Supreme Court, we discovered that about two of those cases were actually delivered based on technicalities. And we also tried to show you, to demonstrate to you, looking back into history and what transpired, when those judgments were delivered. And we saw that those judgments that were delivered based on justice, the people, Nigerians in general, kind of, accepted the judgment because they saw in between the line that the justices of the Supreme Court, actually delivered those judgments based on justice. Now, for those cases, that were delivered based on technicalities, like the case between Olusegun Obasanjo and Olufalaye, in 1999/2000, there were a lot of uproar from both local and international communities. There were a lot of protests and all that. And that tells us that cases delivered on technicalities is not the best for our country. Now, we also did another video where we informed you of how Bukola Saraki had maneuvered the APC to become the Senate president against the intention of his party, the APC. And so, these are another period in our democratic trajectory that, these kind of things can happen again. We looked at, how Saraki, used a lot of diplomatic and military strategy to hoodwink, members of his party and had maneuvered them by becoming the Senate president. Again, we are in that threshold now where we will need to elect the principal officers of the National Assembly. And we are seeing the intrigues playing out again in similar manner. And we are seeing the responses of the party and of the president-elect, towards trying to tame, members-elect of the National Assembly, of the 10th National Assembly, and to micromanage them. And so all these are, interesting dynamics, interesting happenings that can shape our future together as Nigerians. And that is why we are bringing this update to you, so that you are better informed and we will all work together, to see how we can shape a better future for ourselves. By taking responsibility, doing that which you can do. For us, on our own part, we are doing that which we can do by bringing this information to you. And you can also take part in this information dissemination by sharing this video, liking it, commenting, on this video. What you tell us can also help us in putting out some of these informations to the general public, so that we can fashion a way in which we can contribute more to the development of Nigeria. Now, to the updates. Let us start with the video of the presidential court cases that we did before. You can check those videos out on this channel, so that I can have a better perspective in what we are saying. Now, in that video, we mentioned that judgment was delivered on technical grounds in two cases, just like I mentioned before, out of the four cases adjudicated by the Supreme Court that we previewed. Now, thankfully, as the case of the 2023 presidential election has moved to the tribunal, and the tribunal has set the ball rolling in terms of taking statements from the opposing parties, from the plaintiffs and the defendants. We are excited, to announce to you that the justices at the Presidential Election Tribunal has made it clear that they are not going to deliver judgment in this case, in this 2020 presidential election case, based on technicalities, but they are going to deliver judgment based on justice. So we can tell you that this thing we are doing, this research we are doing, bringing out this information and sharing with you, sharing with the public, is reaching, relevant quarters and is contributing to shaping this country for the better. And so be a part of this journey by liking this video, commenting, and subscribing to our channel so that it can also help us to give us the boost that we need, give us the enthusiasm we need to continue in this direction and to do more. So that is some form of good news, that they have come to agree with us that judgment should not be delivered in this case. And in fact, in all cases that appears in court, judgment should not be delivered based on technicalities. Rather, judgment should be delivered based on the extant provisions of the law. Now, you know that in this channel, we believe in research, and so we don't promote fake news or reports from unverified sources. But we can tell you from the proceedings from the court that the case is going to be an interesting case. Now, unlike many pundits have opinionated, it is not a closed case like many want us to believe. This case in court, the 2023 presidential election case in court, is very, very open. Now, what we mean by that is that anything can happen. The case can go to any of the parties, either to the president-elect or to the plaintiffs in the person of Peter Obi or Atiku Abubakar. So we all have to be patient, and we all have to be calm, following the law, and to see, like we said in that video of the presidential court cases, the history of presidential court cases, we made it clear that the onus is on the plaintiffs. The onus is on Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar to provide and present the justices, to present the court with abundance of evidence that will support their allegations. That is how it works. And so we should, do all we can. If you are in the camp of Peter Obi, do all you can to support them by providing them information that you have, that will help them to prosecute their case in court effectively and efficiently. Now let us talk about the National Assembly principal officers and the trending issues. Now, a few days ago, I shared a post on my social media handles, which I titled 5 Red Flags to Watch Out from the Incoming President, who is considered as a strategic leader. Now, at every point in our leadership journey, whatever kind of leader that you are, you must understand that there are some weak points. There are some red flags that are embedded in your behavior or your attitude, on your leadership traits. And so if you don't watch out for them, they could pose a danger to your leadership and to your organization. And so we try to look at what are those red flags that are embedded in the strategic leader's behaviors and attributes. Now, we're not going to tell you all of them. You can check out our social media handles, LeadQuick, at LeadQuick, on Facebook, on Twitter, to see some of those red flags that we mentioned. Or you can check out my own personal social media handles at Osailome on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram to follow us as well. Now, one of the things I mentioned in that post that we should watch out for as a red flag from the incoming president is a lack of transparency that might result in exclusion and internal wrangling in the party and in the country. Now, the recent release of not just states or zones, but names of preferred candidates for the National Assembly principal officer's position, as you can see in the press release signed by the secretary of the APC, is set to prove us right. Now, if you read the press release carefully, you will discover that the party is working to assure You know, that was the language that was used in that letter, and that was why we use it specifically. You can see the letter on your screen. You know, is working to assure that the candidates nominated by the president-elect becomes the principal officers. Don't get me wrong. The president-elect deserves to have allies in the National Assembly. Now, underline that word, allies in the National Assembly, but not cronies. Not cronies. Now, what do I mean by that? That the president-elect, deserves to have allies and not cronies as principal officers in the National Assembly. Now, this is because the National Assembly is supposed to elect persons from the same party as the president-elect, as principal officers, but not that the president-elect will be teleguiding or micromanaging who becomes the principal officers of the National Assembly, as you can see in the press release signed by the party secretary. Now, again, if you read the press release from the party, you will discover some level of dictatorship in the nomination or preference of who becomes the principal officers of the National Assembly. For example, the party is supposed to be the decider of the zoning arrangement. Now, because we operate in a peculiar environment, where we have multiple ethnic groups and religious lines, okay, there is need for, and this is what we have been operating in the past, where we zone certain positions to give, that sense of inclusion. Now, it is expected that the zoning arrangement, for each position should be zoned to a particular zone, such that that zone, especially when it has to do with National Assembly, such that the members elect from that zone, can independently, elect or select who can better serve as members of the principal officers of the National Assembly. Now, that is what the party, as the party with the highest number of members elected to the National Assembly, ought to do, to give a sense of preservation of the legitimacy and the sovereignty of the National Assembly. And so, the zoning arrangement as it is supposed to be the responsibility of the party, of course, in consultation with the president-elect. So the president-elect and the party agrees that, okay, such offices should be zoned to this part of the country and the other one to the other part of the country, giving some freedom, some room for members of the National Assembly to, elect their own person. But if you look at what has transpired, the party came out in that press release to say they have consulted with the president-elect, and the president-elect has, nominated, or rather preferred these persons and not these zones. Not just preferring these persons or the zone, it made it clear from which state the person is coming from. That is, unbecoming, because in these circumstances, the party seems to have taken a backstage. The party seems to be following the president-elect instead of leading the president-elect as the organ or as the platform in which these political office holders were brought into public office in the first place. And so, even when the president-elect usually have influence over some decisions of the party, the tone of the press release clearly showed that the president-elect is, seemingly bigger than the party and is dictating what the party should follow. And of course, from that press release, that as you can see on your screen, the party is also following, the leadership of the president. Now, these developments show signs of trouble if the incoming administration does not soft pedal in this direction. If we are good students of history, we should know that this trend does not augur well for Nigeria, because a situation where you have, the president individually or exerting the authority of his office over the National Assembly leadership is dangerous. Now, the dangers of the president of Nigeria as the head of the executive arm of government, taking responsibility for appointing the principal officers of the National Assembly, which is the legislative arm of government, a different arm of government, are numerous and multifaceted. For instance, it undermines the separation of powers, which is a fundamental principle of democratic governance. This principle presupposes that each arm of government should operate independently of each other, and the functions of one arm should not be usurped by another arm. Now, when the president of Nigeria takes responsibility for appointing the principal officers of the National Assembly, it undermines the independence. Yes, that was what I was looking for instead of sovereignty. It undermines the independence of the legislative arm of government and puts them under the control of the executive arm. Again, this practice impedes checks and balances. It impedes checks and balances of the executive arm. The legislative arm of government is meant to provide a system of checks and balances to the executive arm of government, thereby ensuring accountability and transparency in government. Now, if the principal officers of the National Assembly are appointed by the president, then they may be more likely to be unduly loyal to the president than to their constituencies, and this could hinder the effectiveness of checks and balances. Now, again, this practice where you have the president-elect or the president of Nigeria taking responsibility, unduly influencing the leadership of the National Assembly, decreases accountability. As we have said earlier, if the president has the power to appoint the principal officers of the National Assembly, then it becomes more difficult to hold the executive arm of government accountable for its action. Don't forget, the legislative arm may be less likely to scrutinize actions of the government if they owe their positions to the president. And again, if you have the president of Nigeria or the president-elect of Nigeria influencing the election or selection of National Assembly principal officers, it stifles development. It stifles development. Now, the Nigerian legislature is supposed to play a critical role in the development of the country by churning out policies, investigated or researched policies, independently researched policies and programs that the National Assembly can introduce, for the execution by the executive arm of government. Now, the appointment of loyalists to head the legislative arm of government may lead to the passage of laws or policies that favor the executive arm rather than the interest of the Nigerian people, and this could stifle development and lead to a lack of progress. These are dangers that we are foretelling, and we are using this medium, this platform, to request and to invite the president-elect to critically look into his strategy, his style of governance as we move closer to the inauguration day. Now, while we look forward to the justices of the Presidential Tribunal and eventually to the Supreme Court, justice of the Supreme Court, doing the needful, let us in the meantime call on the president-elect to allow the National Assembly to elect their principal officers and maintain and sustain their independence as an independent arm of government of Nigeria. Thank you so much. Don't forget to follow us. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to like this video and to share this video to help us do what we do. Until we come your way again, bye for now.